If you just looked at the headlines, you'd probably think Treasury Wine Estates is in trouble. A big loss, dividends suspended, and weak sentiment around the stock. But when you actually go through the numbers, White right pointing backhand index, the story is very different. And possibly a lot more interesting. Let's start with what shocked the market. Treasury Wine Estates reported a statutory loss, driven largely by a massive write-down of its US assets. Now that sounds scary, but here's the key point. White right pointing backhand index, this is mostly a non-cash impairment. No actual cash leaving the business. Just an accounting adjustment reflecting more conservative assumptions. So if you strip that out, White right pointing backhand index, the underlying business is still profitable. Now let's talk about operations. Because this is where things get interesting. Despite all the noise, Treasury Wine Estates is still seeing positive underlying demand. In fact, their flagship brand, Penfolds, is showing strong growth in key markets. China up significantly, Australia growing steadily. And even in the US, outside California disruptions, growth is still happening. So what's causing the weakness? White right pointing backhand index, not demand, but distribution and strategy changes. The company is actively reducing excess inventory, limiting shipments that were hurting brand value, fixing distribution issues in the US. In other words, White right pointing backhand index, they're cleaning up past inefficiencies. And this is actually a positive long-term move. Because instead of chasing volume, Treasury Wine Estates is doubling down on White right pointing backhand index premiumization, selling fewer bottles, but at higher margins. Now let's zoom out. This company owns a portfolio of global premium wine brands. And premium businesses have a very specific advantage. White right pointing backhand index pricing power. When conditions improve, they can increase margins much faster than normal companies. Next, balance sheet and financial discipline. Management is clearly focused on maintaining a strong capital structure, keeping leverage under control, preserving liquidity. They've even suspended dividends temporarily. Now that might sound negative, but it actually tells you something important. White right pointing backhand index, they're prioritizing long-term stability over short-term payouts. And then comes one of the most important parts of the story. White right pointing backhand index, the transformation program. Treasury Wine Estates is targeting around $100 million per year in cost improvements over the next few years. This includes simplifying operations, improving efficiency using data and automation, streamlining the portfolio. This is not just cost-cutting. White right pointing backhand index, it's a full business optimization. Now let's talk about the outlook. Management expects White right pointing backhand index stronger performance in the second half. White right pointing backhand index improvement as US distribution stabilizes. White right pointing backhand index continued momentum in premium brands. So while short-term results look weak, White right pointing backhand index, the direction of travel is improving. So putting it all together, here's the investment thesis for Treasury Wine Estates. The headline loss is mostly accounting-driven. Core demand remains intact. Premium brands provide long-term pricing power. Management is actively fixing structural issues. Cost transformation can improve margins. Earnings are expected to recover. White right pointing backhand index, this is not a declining business. It's a business going through a strategic reset. And here's the reality of investing. The best opportunities don't show up when everything looks perfect. They show up when White right pointing backhand index, the story looks messy. White right pointing backhand index, but the fundamentals are still strong. Now, this is not risk-free. There are still challenges. US market softness, execution risk in restructuring, inventory adjustments. But if management delivers White right pointing backhand index, this could turn into a classic turnaround story. Final thought. Treasury Wine Estates today is not about what just happened. It's about what happens next. And if the company executes well, White right pointing backhand index, the current weakness might end up being the opportunity.